So Roger Waters and David Draiman are in a bit of a war of the words, and this puts me in an awkward position because I'm a fan of Disturbed. I'm a fan of David Draiman. I've seen him perform live. I think he's a brilliant musician. He's an outstanding performer. The music he makes with Disturbed is entertaining and fun, and it's the music I grew up on listening to. I'm also a fan of Roger Waters. I think Pink Floyd is a band that deeply, deeply needs to be respected and needs to be shown the proper reverence when it comes to music, and particularly rock music. Without Pink Floyd and without Roger Waters, we probably wouldn't have many of the rock bands and metal bands that we listen to today. But they're in a war of words over Israel and the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions. And Roger Waters, if you follow him, if you follow Pink Floyd, if you follow rock and metal music news in general, you'll know that he's quite in favour of BDS, and it's a movement that boycotts goods and universities and things from Israel in protest over their treatment of the Palestinian people and their oppression of people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. David Draiman is Israeli. He's very pro-Israeli. He's famously quit Twitter because he voiced his pro-Israeli views on Twitter and was hounded and harassed, and people hurled anti-Semitic comments at him and welcome to Twitter. And he ended up quitting Twitter over that because he didn't want to be harassed and intimidated and browbeaten by these people into because of his views, if you will. But for me, I always try and separate the artist from their art, if you will, particularly if they're an artist that I don't really like as a person. For instance, J.K. Rowling. Harry Potter was one of the books that, or one of the series of books that I first read growing up at the age of about 10 or 9, and I absolutely loved them. And the film's all the same. But J.K. Rowling, sometimes she can be something of a champagne socialist. She's a bit transphobic. It's just emerged as well, and she's not the best of people, I don't think. But I try and separate her from her art and her from her work. And I'm trying to do the same with David Draiman. But sadly, I missed the Twitter storm that caused David Draiman to jump ship and leave Twitter. And I did see some of the comments, but I didn't jump on it and didn't comment enough, I don't think. But for me, BDS has got its problems. It's not the perfect movement, in my opinion. I don't agree with boycotting universities because I believe that dialogue and actual conversation is vital to these sort of situations. Boycotting goods I can understand because you're then putting economic pressure on Israel to improve their treatment of the Palestinians and people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, etc. But that's the area where I really draw concern with BDS. Other than that, I am a supporter of BDS because sanctions and boycotts brought down South African apartheid. And yes, South Africa still has its problems now, but that system of apartheid is now over because of sanctions, because of boycotts. But David Draiman and people in general who like to support Israel and tend to lean towards Israel, they seem to be under the illusion that BDS is anti-Israel, it's anti-Jewish, it's anti-Semitic, and it's not. It's not about intimidating or boycotting or treating Jewish people badly. It's about protesting the actions of a nation state. That's what it's all about. It's not about being anti-Semitic, being anti-Jewish, being anti-this, being anti-that. And I know a lot of people say, well, if it's not anti-Semitic, why aren't you criticising other nations and their treatment of people? Well, we are. We actually are. If you ask any left-winger, because these people are predominantly left-wing who criticise Israel, not exclusively, but predominantly. If you ask any left-winger what they think of the human rights abuses in, say, China, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, I promise you they will tell you those abuses are horrific, they're horrendous, they should not be happening. But herein lies the difference, because Israel receives unprecedented levels of support, financially, militarily, and diplomatically, from the West, from Britain, from the USA, from all these other nations, Western countries, that Saudi Arabia, China, North Korea, whatever, that they don't get. When you have a Chinese diplomat arriving in London, for instance, I can promise you there's a 98% chance that the Prime Minister, or whoever it is I'm meeting, will bring up human rights abuses. Whenever there's a controversy about how Saudi, the Khashoggi thing, for instance, I promise you that there will be coverage. there will be condemnation from the British diplomats, from the British government. When Israel do it, when the Israelis do it, when the Israeli government does it, there's not so much talk about it. They tend to sort of brush it under the rug and ignore it. And that's because we have a close relationship with Israel. And that's being blown under the bridge. And this is what David Draiman and people who support Israel fail to understand. It's not about China. It's not about the Saudis or the Iranians or the North Koreans. Those countries will face due criticism from the Western governments. Israel doesn't seem to be facing that same level of criticism, that same level of scrutiny. And that's what it's about. It's what the BDS movement is trying to do. It's trying to bring light to the treatment of Palestinian peoples at the hands of the Israelis. And it's trying to do it by boycotting their goods and making them see, look, we're aware of what's going on. You need to cut back. You need to actually treat these people like human beings. Let's not forget that you expelled them from their homes after the Balfour Declaration. You expelled them from their homes, took over their lands. You keep invading, territories that aren't yours to take, that the UN has said to you. It got to the point where the UN has said to you, go no further. And you've continued anyway. So it needs to stop. That's what it's all about. It's about peace. It's not about favouring Hamas over the Israelis. It's not about that. It's not about being anti-Jewish. It's not about being even anti-Israel. It's about legitimate concerns over human rights violations, unarmed protesters marching to walls and being shot, men in wheelchairs being sniped, 13-year-old girls being locked up for shouting in an IDF officer's face. That's what it's about. It's not about being anti-Semitic. There's loads of Jews who criticise Israel. Loads of people of Jewish descent, of Jewish faith, of Jewish practice that are critical of the way Israel treats Arabs and people in the Palestinian territories. The Israeli government at the moment is very anti-Palestinian. It's quite right-wing. Very anti-Arab. That's what it's about. It's about protesting that government. It's not even about protesting the existence of Israel in general. It's just about protesting the actions of a particular government. I promise you, if the Israelis tomorrow elected a government that vastly improved the treatment of the Palestinian people and the way that people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are treated, I promise you the BDS movement would go away. Because that's their aim. That is what they want. They don't want to undermine or shut down or kill Israel or destroy Israel. That's not what they're after. They are not in bed with Hamas and Hezbollah. I am very anti-Israeli policy. I'm very critical of Israel and of their policies towards these people. I do not for a second support Hamas, but I do understand why Hamas has came to be and why they came to power in the Palestinian territories. Because when you persecute people, when you treat them badly, when you keep them underfoot, when you prosecute them, when you lock them in jails, when you shoot unarmed civilians, when you cut off construction materials and food and medical aid, they will turn to extremists in their hour of need. And I'm going to run the risk of being called anti-Semitic here, and I'm going to draw a parallel with the Nazis. Because the Germans were treated horrendously after the First World War. They were forced to pay reparations that were beyond comprehension. Their army, navy and air force was cut down to the bare minimum. And along came a nutter called Hitler, and he came to power because what he was saying was he wanted to make Germany brilliant. He wanted to make Germany great again. He wanted to make Germany powerful again. And the German people believed in him. And he used the Jews as this scapegoat. And they, in turn, used the Jews as scapegoats and gave him what he wanted. This is how fascism and extremism in general, it's how it happens. So we need to start talking to people like Roger Waters. David Draiman and Roger Waters need to sit down, have a conversation, a rational one, where David Draiman doesn't lose his head like he did on Twitter and storm off. Frankly, I don't know why he was on Twitter if he was going to not be aware that there were trolls on there. It's Twitter. But he needs to sit down and actually think about it. In fact, I would recommend him to read the works of Norman Finkelstein or Noam Chomsky, two prominent Jewish intellectuals who are very, very critical of the actions of Israel towards the Palestinian people. and who understand it's not about Jewish people. It is not about being anti-Semitic. It is about criticising a nation. That's all. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.